Oh, no.
You just said, okay.
Did you go live?
Yeah, what's going on with this thing?
Hey guys, we're back on. We had to fix that. There was a power outage. So I apologize. Beginning of the show is a little weird today. We've got joining us Zeke at Cop with Attitude. He, incredible guy. You've probably seen him on Twitter. He's giving a law enforcement perspective to us today because we've had a bunch of people on. We've had people that are associated to BLM on. We've had people associated to George Floyd on. Now we want to talk about wider issues from police perspective, especially the blue flu, defunding police, basically just the general attitude towards police in America right now. So first of all, I want to welcome you to the show, Zeke, and also thank you for the incredible work you're doing to keep your community safe and really the whole country safe. I mean, we all owe a debt of gratitude to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the appreciation, all the thanks. I mean, it's not needed, but it's definitely welcome, and we definitely feel it, and we definitely appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know that it's something that I think we need to do. You're an officer, so you probably won't, encourage this openly and everything, but I think it's something we need to do. I talked to an officer here where we live in Tennessee and talked to him this week, and he was like, this has been probably the hardest 3 weeks of my career in terms of just the conversations we're having, the way we've been treated. He's like, the way I've been treated just at like normal stops, or domestic violence situations, I've been treated differently than I ever have been in the past. Like it's my worst experiences, but on almost every call, it feels like. And that's in a very conservative place, so I can't imagine where you're at in New York, that it's any better than that. So how has your experience changed since this all has, started to sort of boil over in America? How has it changed on a day-to-day basis in terms of doing your job?
I mean, we felt a lot of the pressure after the whole Eric Garner incident. It was very tense in New York, but nothing like this. I've been a cop for 14 years, and this is the worst I've seen it. I mean, just as far as, we have to watch where, if we go pick up a sandwich from someplace, we have to make sure that they're not tampering with it. There was an incident a couple of days ago in a Shake Shack where I still believe they poisoned these cops' drinks. Now, the Shake Shack employees were cleared. It's my belief that something happened, and it might have been intentional. Just as far as, visiting people, going to jobs, just driving down the street, we have to really watch what we're doing now. It's, just in New York. Of course, we don't have the backing from our government officials. We don't have the backing from the people that we need the backing from. So, I feel like, and a lot of other cops feel like we're on our own right now. This is the most tense I've seen it. And my biggest fear is that something's going to happen bad to one of us.
Yep. If you look at it, it already has. We've already seen officers get killed since this began. But, what we've talked about together is that there's a lot of competing forces that are going on right now. And most of them are bad when it comes to this subject. There's definitely some people that are well-intentioned that just want the job to be safer for police and the job to be safer, for citizens and in terms of, where they see this all ending up. But there's a lot of other competing forces that do not have good agendas. And what it's all sort of leading to, if you thought of this as a recipe, is this is a very bad place. It's gonna end somewhere really, really, really negative. And I think you look at what's happening in Atlanta right now. In Atlanta, you have a DA in Fulton County who essentially decided he wants to be a celebrity. There's no other excuse for what he's doing. This is a DA who's been embroiled in major controversy. He's been accused of sexual harassment twice just in the past year. Beyond that, he's also under investigation for a form of, funneling money into a charity where then he was taking money, and this was money coming from the government. Okay, so this is a DA that's embroiled in scandal already, and he's in a contentious primary. So he has political motivation for doing this. And it's clear as day that he saw this as an opportunity to become his own little celebrity and to try to shake up his primary race so he wouldn't lose. And he may have larger aspirations than that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does. So that's really the nuts and bolts of what's actually happening right now in that Atlanta situation. But the long term of what that's going to create is really dangerous, because you're seeing it now with Atlanta officers that are calling in with what's being called the blue flu. where they're not coming in, they're refusing to protect certain areas. And you know what? I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all, because what they've done is essentially said the city does not have your back. We will not protect you. And essentially, you can't shoot back until someone shoots you. So they're basically telling police, you need to be shot before you're allowed to do anything about it. So, you know, as an officer yourself, what message are you being sent by these people? And, you know, how are you able to keep this city safe, keep innocent people safe, when the message is you can't protect your own life?
Well, I mean, police work in and of itself is ugly. There's no good way to arrest someone that's being combative. You know, it's not like the 50s and the 60s television cop shows where you kind of just put a hand on the criminal's shoulder and he gives up right then and there. I mean, sometimes these fights go on and they go on long, and fights are never pretty. It's not like, you know, Mike Tyson back in the day, you give them a 1-2 combination and they kind of just go down. No, fights are ugly. And a lot of times you have to fight to arrest someone that's a violent suspect, that's a dangerous criminal. So a lot of these reforms that are being passed now are directly protecting the criminal. That part I don't understand. Like, why would you pass a law that basically just protects criminals and makes cops out to be the bad guys? I don't get that line of thinking. As far as this DA in Atlanta, yeah, I mean, the Georgia Board of Investigations wasn't even done with their investigation, so he moved ahead of them and made his own decision.
Yep.
Atlanta PD, I stand with them, and I have no problem saying that. I stand with them. I'm not saying cops go rogue, but at some point, cops are going to get very frustrated to the point like, what do we do now? No one signed up for this job to be made into be a criminal, to be a racist, to be made as someone that, you know, likes going out there and beating people up. To my knowledge, no cop wants to go out there and shoot someone or get in a fight or do, you know, we all just want to make it home to our families. We were taught that in the academy. Our number one job is to make it back home to our families. So I don't get these reforms. I don't get these laws. And as far as this Atlanta DA making himself out to be a celebrity, I think that's exactly what he did. I think he moved in his own best interest. I think he moved in a way that was going to make him look very good and make the cop look very bad. And it's wrong. There's no other way to say it. It's flat out wrong.
Right. Can you describe to us what it's like when you are already having to deal with a contentious situation, but then there's the element of race playing into it? Like, I don't know, maybe you've had some personal experiences where there's been a white police officer and a combative, somebody of a different race, or a black police officer such as yourself and somebody who's white. Can you explain what those race dynamics look like in conjunction with, violent resisting of arrest?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have the same problems that a lot of my white counterparts have. I mean, I've worked in minority neighborhoods my entire career. So me doing something is different than them doing something. But no partner I've ever worked with was a racist. No person I've ever worked with in any of the precincts I've ever worked in was a flat out racist to the point where they wanted to go out to do something to hurt black people. They were doing their jobs. And if I'm on scene and I'm watching them and I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the situation, I'm letting them do their jobs. I mean, as far as brutality goes, I will say there have been some situations where tempers got the best, but then that's when your partner steps in and goes, "Hey, you're all right. We're done. Job's over." But it's not like this is a common occurrence. And like I said, in my 14-year career, I can think of maybe 3 times where I've had to step in and go, "Okay, enough. We're done. This is it." So I mean, it's not. And even if you look at nationwide stats, it's not the pandemic. I'll use that pandemic that everybody's making it out to be. I think in the calendar year 2019, there were 10 black men shot that were quote unquote unarmed. In that same year, there were 19 white men shot that were quote unquote unarmed. So I mean, where is this racial dynamic coming from? If you look at percentage of violent crimes, if you look at police interactions, it actually shows that cops are more hesitant to encounter black people than they are white people, because there is that Ferguson effect, as we call it. There is that thing in the back of your mind where you say, am I good? Is this going to make YouTube? We're actually trained now to think of YouTube, to think of people recording us. So, I mean, it definitely factors in. I mean, as far as the racial dynamic, no, nobody wants to be called a racist if they're not. I mean, so, it does. I've seen a lot of my fellow cops, they are a lot more hesitant to interact with someone of a different race. They'll wait for a black cop to show up, or, if they're dealing with a largely Spanish population, a Spanish cop to show up, just that they have that extra backing. And it shouldn't be that way. If you're not a racist, you're being made to be one. It's not fair.
Right. That's sad that that's what it comes to. Can you explain to us what happens in areas that have more violence? What happens when there's an effort to remove the police from those areas, or they're defunded, or just the resources aren't there and the manpower isn't there? What effect does that have on those communities?
Well, I mean, it's not going to affect the communities where there isn't a lot of crime. Here in New York, we have just in Queens, we have areas that don't have a whole lot of crime. If you put out 10 cops for the entire area, that's fine. But then you have the areas that have more crime. 10 cops isn't going to make a difference in these areas with more crime. You're going to need 25, 30 cops, 40 cops in some areas to really just be able to respond to a lot of jobs that are there. So now if you defund the police and you don't have those 40 cops there to handle all the jobs, and you're putting out 20 cops into an area where you reasonably need 40 cops, all that's going to do is hurt these areas. And these areas, I'm going to say it, are predominantly minority. They're heavy Spanish populations, they're heavy black populations. So you've got these politicians that think they're doing the right thing. You've got people like John Legend, who wants to defund the police. John Legend has his own security team. He doesn't need to call the police. A lot of these limousine liberals out there that think they're doing the right thing by these poor minority neighborhoods, they can live in areas where they don't really have to call the police. What the population is going to affect mostly are low income Black and Hispanic people that live in these areas where they can't afford private security. They can't afford, a lot of the modern things that make them feel safe, security cameras, door cameras, things like that. So it's going to affect them. And that's what's unfortunate, because you've got 3% of the population in these areas that are committing all the crimes, that are committing all the violent felonies. Most people in these areas just want to live and work and go home. And they're going to be the ones affected. They're going to be the ones getting robbed on the way back from the train. They're going to be the ones getting robbed getting off the bus. So that's who my heart goes out to.
Definitely.
Yep. We've talked about this before where, we're not doing this show, and I'm not opposed to defund police for my own sake, because we could hire private security if we wanted to, but that's not the right thing for our country. We know that where we live, it's a nice area and there would be private security and that whole thing would get figured out. I'm doing this and she's doing this because we care about the health of our entire nation. And anybody with a conscience needs to think about this issue from that perspective. So, thinking about perspective and giving perspective, I want to ask you about use of force training. You've done use of force training, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Many times.
I assume, every cop does use of force training. So, going beyond that, have you ever seen the video from Arizona where the activist, the Reverend, he was very opposed to police and he was protesting police on a regular basis? They invited him to do use of force training, and then his entire perspective shifted after doing use of force training. Have you ever seen that video?
Yeah, I have. And honestly, I think that's the reason why people like Al Sharpton, who I'm not a fan of, people like Shaun King, who I'm definitely not a fan of, they will not do this training because it'll alter their entire testimony. I mean, listen, there's no way you can experience that kind of training and not have your entire perspective changed. Cops have to make split-second decisions. And the only thing I can say about use of force training is that they do it in situations where there's a lot of lighting. They give you a very scaled down version of what we go through in real life. I mean, they're not dealing with pit bulls on a rooftop. They're not dealing with, a crackhead who just had his shot and now he's doesn't feel pain.
And
these are
on top of that, in the training, you have the benefit of knowing you're not actually going to die. Whereas when you're working the street,
that's important.
Cop, you don't have that benefit.
You don't, so I've been in situations before where, after you leave, you don't, that's when you notice that your heart rate is very accelerated. In use of force training and these controlled environments, you're okay. You're not going to die. Ultimately nothing's going to happen to you. Does it still feel very real to a lot of these people that are going through it? Yeah. And it gives them a small glimpse into what we go through, which is why I heavily endorse use of force training just for civilians. Just so they can see a little bit of what we go through, and hopefully it changes their narrative. But they have to be willing to open their minds to that opportunity. Like I said, Al Sharpton, he's not going to do it. Shaun King's not going to do it.
Right.
So that's my proposal, is that I want to see us take use of force training, add funding so that use of force training can go to every middle school in America, and have police work with middle schoolers. And not only that, this would actually be a great sort of way to introduce police, to them as an employment opportunity in the future one day, to get them excited about that prospect and that opportunity. It would, kind of like show the ones who feel like this is something they're excited about and give them another route in life. But aside from that, if you go into every community and engage middle schoolers in a fun way to do a use of force training, to teach them how difficult it is to make those split-second decisions, and then back that up with, hey, so this is why, if anything ever happens where you're pulled over or you're in a situation where you're misidentified and police approach you, be as cooperative as possible, because they don't know who you are at that point. And if the quicker you comply, the quicker you'll be done with the situation, and that, this can end in a positive result. Where this ends in a negative result is in these situations like you just saw in use of force, where people didn't comply, or they acted sketchy, right, or they ran, or whatever it is. That this is where you start to veer into territory where things get really murky. So I think that would be a way where we actually long-term, because there's no short-term fix. There's no short-term fix here. The long-term fix, though, is changing the hearts and minds of the next generation. And I think the way we do that is with use of force training that they're engaged with, that they're able to sort of have their own hands-on experience of, oh, I see why this job's really hard for officers. These guys have their own families and women, and they want to go home at the end of the day and see their kids, see their husband, see their wife. And if that's put, if anything threatens that, they have to make a less than a second, split-second decision on whether or not to protect their life. And that's not a position anybody should envy. It's not an easy position. So that leads us into, this whole defund the police.
If I can cut you off just for a second, as far as training the next generation, what would help the most is for parents to stop telling their kids, if you act up, the police are going to come get you. For every cop I know, that's our biggest pet peeve. If we're just standing there and people are pointing at us, mothers or fathers are pointing at us like, hey, if you don't behave yourself, I'm going to tell the cop. All that does is instill fear in kids that cops are these big boogeymen that are going to come and get them. I remember working a fair one time where there was a 4-year-old kid that we could not get his parents' information out of him because he truly believed in his heart that we were going to arrest his parents. All we wanted to do was get this kid back to his parents. And he was so scared that we were going to take his mommy and daddy to jail. And it took us about a good 20 minutes just to break through. That's heartbreaking. We don't want to do that, So it starts with the parents. That's my hugest philosophy. That's my biggest belief on this job, that if we're going to influence the next generation, it has to start with the parents.
I think that is, such a powerful thing that you just said. I'm so glad that you shared that with us today, because it starts there. Everything, in our culture starts in the home, and that dialogue that we have with our kids and how they view police, with their sense of respect for the job. But also, before you put on that badge, you're first and foremost a human being, somebody's dad, somebody's brother. And we have to have respect for police as our fellow human beings and neighbors and fathers and brothers, and not just look at them. This new culture shift that's happening, dehumanizing police, is there's some sort of soulless robots enforcing and brutalizing people, is so dangerous. It's so wildly irresponsible what the media is doing, and parents have a huge responsibility now to counteract that narrative and talk to our kids and explain, why do we show so much respect for military? And we, the police, we should be doing the same thing with the police. They're here to keep us safe. They're our dads. They're your friends, parent, mom. And change that narrative around that. And I'm glad you honed in on that specific detail, because just something little like that,
Right.
the way children's minds work can have that negative association already from the get-go. So I think that's so important. I'm so glad you shared that with us today.
Yeah, me
Thank
too.
you. Thank
So,
you.
the area I want to get into with you is on the defund police movement. And by the way, you let us know when you need to go, because I don't have a clock in front of me. And I know you're on a time crunch because you're actually a working officer. So you let us know. But the defund police movement, I think there's a little bit of confusion that some people have because they've only heard bits and pieces. And I think, the initial thing that you naturally think is, they all want to defund and dismantle police. Well, there's actually something a little more nefarious than that at play here, because there is a sect of people on the far left who just straight up want no police, no nothing, and they want to get it, and that's crazy. Everybody knows that's crazy that has a brain, okay? Unfortunately, there's not as many people with brains as I would hope, but there's other people on the left who are after something even more nefarious in my mind. They want to take police that are now on sort of a local structure and sort of decentralized, and they want to bring all of them under the control of the federal government and have one unified sort of command. And, my first thought with that is that, in 1933, and by the way, I don't do this sort of without thinking, this is a big sort of comparison to make, but it's an important one. In 1933, Hitler was consolidating power in Germany.
Right.
And what they ended up doing is they ended up taking and all those decentralized police, they brought them under the central command. That same command also had the SS underneath it, the paramilitary wing of the Nazi party, okay? And they ended up from there eventually fusing the SS into the police force. And then after that, you had training on all these police officers within this big central command to be biased towards certain races and ideologies. So, you look at that and you see how quickly it got there. That obviously was not what they sold people on at the beginning. At the beginning, it was sold on unifying the police under one common sort of set of rules instead of, all that type of stuff. But it ended up there in a very dangerous place where you ended up with police taking part in the Holocaust, okay? I'm not saying we're there in America, but what I am saying is that what they're proposing puts you in a position where all you need is one really dangerous leader to then take you to that place. So, and the obvious concern too is that with the Democrats, they don't have an official paramilitary arm, but they do have an unofficial one with Antifa. Antifa's aligned with the Democrats, and we've seen them in the streets destroying property, firebombing buildings, firebombing police cars, all these crazy things. So you as a police officer, how do you feel about it when you hear this defund police, dismantle police, or any sort of, derivative of it that would take us to a place where there's a uniform central command? Is that something you're worried about?
Well, actually, I never thought of it like that. I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's more food for thought. What I do know is that I like the fact that police aren't as centralized. I like the fact that they fall under their different jurisdictions, just because there are different laws, different, different bylaws, different statutes in different states and different counties, things like that. To have a unified police force, wow, I've never thought of it like that. Although I will say Antifa, they are the opposite of everything that we signed up for as cops, or at least that I signed up for as a law enforcement officer. I don't believe in censoring people that I don't agree with. I don't believe in using violence to make my point. I believe in enforcing the law fair and impartially, not just against one group of people, which they have shown themselves to do. They've used violence. They have enforced the law against a certain group of people. They want to use intimidation and fear, which myself, like I said, myself as a law enforcement officer, that's not what I signed up for. That's not what I agree with. If the proposal is to have us as law enforcement officers start working with them for some sort of new police force, I'd be the first one to quit. That's not what I signed up for. That's not what I want to represent as someone that enforces the law. The reason I got into this is because I wanted to help people. I wanted to make my corner better. I always felt good when I was walking a foot post, and people would come up to me and say, "I'm glad you're here. Can you stay here for a while, please?" That's what I want to represent. I don't want fear and intimidation. I don't want to cover my face up. I want people to know who I am. Within reason. I don't want them showing up at my house, but I want them to say, hey, that's Zeke over there. Good to see him. Wow, but I never thought about that aspect of it. 1933 with the SS. I'm a big fan of history, so I'm glad you made that comparison. That's actually a lot of food for thought.
Yeah,
something to watch, something to look out for.
My next question would be morale. What is the morale right now for police across America? Like, what are you hearing from other officers? What's going through everybody's hearts, minds, the concerns of family and everything? Like, where are we really at with where police are feeling?
What morale? That's my first thought. I'm part of a network of about 30,000 cops nationwide. And in red states, they're kind of looking at us like, I feel sorry for what you guys are going through. Because they're enjoying having their government back them up. They're enjoying being able to just ride around and not have to look for numbers or look for this or look for that or in a lot of the blue states, we're the bad guys. And again, they're talking about what we all signed up for. No one signed up to be the bad guy. The overwhelming majority of us took this job because we wanted to help people. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people that shouldn't wear a badge. I've known plenty of cops where I've told them flat out, you don't deserve this job. But in a lot of the blue states, morale is down. In places like Chicago, in places like New York, in places like Los Angeles, I've got buddies in the LAPD that only have about 10 years on the job, and they are done. They're fried. They would leave tomorrow if they could. A lot of people here in New York would leave tomorrow if they could. And that's heartbreaking because a lot of us, being a cop was a calling for us. We love what we do. We take pride in what we do. There's a reason why we buy shirts that have blue lines on them, or there's a reason why we, on our own time, we go to cop functions. And just to now have this feeling like we're the bad guys, where people don't trust us, where people look at us and we can't get a cup of coffee without someone putting their hands up. Don't shoot me. Hands up, don't shoot. We can't go. If we go to a Subway and they take our sandwich and go to the back with it, or take it behind the counter, all of a sudden we're paranoid. There was a video of the cop crying because McDonald's took too long with her order. Now, do I think she should have cried about it and put that on video and put that on the internet? Probably not, but it's a very real concern that a lot of us have, where if they take our food and disappear with it, now we're trying to figure out, okay, what are they doing? Just me personally, right after the Eric Garner incident, I found glass in my wrap. I ordered a sandwich wrap from the store, and I found glass in it. And this is me, a black cop. So. I mean, it's the morale is down. The morale is down, and I can't see it getting any better anytime soon. I wish it would. I've had great times with a lot of these guys. I've had a great time being a cop in New York, but we're not the bad guys. That's the only message we have to keep putting out. We're not the bad guys.
Yeah. And sadly, I agree with you. I don't know when it's going to get better or what will make it get better, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about reforms. So, I mean, are there any reforms that you think are needed, necessary to make your job safer, and by proxy would make things safer for citizens? Like, is there anything that you think is a good idea? Like maybe having, some other mental health options to deal with homeless people and stuff like that, so that, your time isn't wasted on certain calls like that. Is there anything at all that you think would improve things?
Or policy?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, sure. I mean, I don't disagree with us responding to every mental health job. If there is a psychologist, something that can help this mentally deficient person better, but I'm all for it. As far as schools go, if they want to take us out of the schools and put people, different counselors in there that can connect with children better, under certain circumstances, because there are a lot of kids that are just violent. But under certain circumstances, if you have a professional that can get in there and talk to them better than we can, because we're not child psychologists, fine.
Yeah.
But as far as a lot of these defund the police initiatives, where they want to cut down the size of the force and they want to take away this tool from us that we use to make people safe, or they want to take away that tool, that I don't agree with. As far as if they want more neighborhood policing opportunities where we get a chance to really talk to some of the people in the neighborhood, that's fine too. I'm all for that. I'm all for introducing ourselves to the neighborhood. We don't have to be these nameless, faceless people in the crowd. When I was on patrol, I would purposely go and buy my sandwiches from local delis, or as we call them here in New York, bodegas. Because just that they knew who I was. I would buy water from them, I buy sandwiches from them, just that they knew who I was. And it actually worked out. There were a lot of people in the neighborhood that knew me. But as far as, for the most part, as far as defunding police and trying to take us away from places that we need to be, no, that I don't agree with.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed about it's especially white liberals who say things like about getting cops out of schools. Most of their kids go to schools that don't need cops. I went to a school that had gangs. We needed our cops that were at our school. They had an office at the school. They were at the school all the time because kids got stabbed at school. So, it's not an option to say, hey, you know what, Susie, the social worker, is going to be able to come in and stop the stabbing. The person who's able to stop the stabbing is the officer who was at our school that used to work gang units, because we had basically, teenagers who were starting to join gangs. And it was, a dangerous situation on some days. So you need to have that option ready to quickly respond, and I think that the people who are the loudest voices against that have never experienced or had their children experience what it's like to need that help quickly. Right. And that's what a lot of this comes down to is the left is sort of like, they're blind to their own privilege. They love to talk about white privilege. They don't ever talk about their own privilege. Okay. And their own privilege on the left is that they're blind to these real problems that real people face. In the most disadvantaged communities, people need police because they're the ones who get violently robbed on a regular basis. They're the ones who get mugged on a regular basis. They're the ones who end up shot in a drive-by. So it's really easy from our ivory towers to sit here and pretend like everything's police's fault. But the reality is, we had one weekend where over 120 people were shot in Chicago, okay? And those were mostly young black men that were shooting other young black men. And, that in itself is a crisis. That's a real crisis. Police shot less than 20 unarmed black men over the last 2019 and 2020 put together. So when you look at that, you had more than that shot in one weekend in Chicago, almost times 5. Okay. Actually, yeah, it's almost times 5 on one weekend versus 2 years of police shootings of unarmed men. That's something that's a real crisis.
Well, that's also my beef with Black Lives Matter and their movement. They pop up every time a white cop shoots a black person, and a quote unquote unarmed black person. Where are they when all these people are getting shot in Chicago? Mostly black men. Where are they when people are getting shot in Baltimore? Mostly black men. Los Angeles, Detroit, St. Louis. They're quiet on that. That's not their fight. Their name is Black Lives Matter, but not all Black Lives matter to them, which is my beef with them. If you're going to call yourself Black Lives Matter, be there for the important shootings. Grandmothers getting shot, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds getting shot for sitting at a bus stop. Don't just pick and choose where you want to get involved. Get involved for all of it.
Right, and not just under the guise of sending money towards your political candidate. That's the biggest issue I have. Right. It's not about funneling money back into the communities that are hurting, that need better security, better policing. Nope. That money's going straight to the white Democrat Party. Yeah. That's running. That's what it comes down to. It's disingenuous to use race, and this movement, this nonprofit movement,
to do that. And they don't explain to anybody where the money's going. You look at the Black Lives Matter, they're actually funneling their money through Act Blue, which collects money, and all of their, where they're putting the money is donated to Democratic causes, Democratic candidates. So clearly the idea that, oh, we need to act, in their mind, we need to act means we need to vote for Democrats, okay? But the reality is, you just named all those cities where we see the highest, rates of murder, okay? What do they all have in common?
They're all Democrat cities.
Yep. They're run by Democrats. Jinx, you're it. We knew it at the same time. But yes, they're run by Democrats. That is the common thread in all the cities that you named. And it's something that Black Lives Matter, the organization, never addresses. And they love to sort of convolute the meaning so that if you're not supportive of the organization, you don't believe Black Lives Matter. And that's just, nothing could be further from the truth. We care about Black lives. 100%. That's why we do this. We've done a bunch of episodes addressing these issues and talking about them. We care, but we don't support the organization. The organization is a far left social justice group that fights for Democrat policies and Democratic answers when Democrats and their policies are the problem. They're the ones causing the problem in most cases. So, you look at this, and I just wonder why we never hear the stories on mainstream media aligning where all of these famous shootings that are supposedly, really terrible. Why are we not talking about the cities they happened in and who runs them? That should be the real story. Who runs them and who's allowing this sort of issue to continue to resurface? So it's neither here nor there, but I think it's an important issue that, people have to question. Why doesn't this get talked about?
I mean, if you look at Black Lives Matter, they're all about their agenda. They're pushing a certain agenda. So if they're going to look at the cities in which this is happening, if they look at why this is happening, if they're going to look at the causes leading up to these shootings, gang life in these areas, the family situation, things like that, it's going to destroy their entire agenda. You've got Colin Kaepernick, who was a slightly above average quarterback, kneeling, and now he's the face of the movement. Again, for him, what has he done besides kneel to really fix this situation?
Nothing. In fact, he's made it worse. He's made it worse because he's helped stoke division by wearing socks with cops depicted as pigs and wearing a shirt of Fidel Castro, who I'm Cuban. Fidel Castro is responsible for the deaths and murders of a bunch of innocent Cubans. So, he's done nothing but stoke division. And beyond that, by the way, President Trump invited him to the White House for a conversation, and Colin Kaepernick said no. So he's not interested in real change. He's not interested in really actually discussing what his issue is, because Trump was man enough after he came into office to say, you know what, I don't like the way that you've done this, but my door's open. Come talk to me. Come tell me what your issue is, and we'll talk about it. Colin Kaepernick didn't take the invite. I wonder why. But I do want to ask you a couple of viewer questions before you have to go. I think the most important one that we got was, we were asked, are you single? That was a serious question we got.
No, I'm actually married.
He's married, so hands off, ladies. Second question. We kind of talked about this. Can you protect yourself after seeing what happened in Atlanta? Do you feel like, in short form, do you feel like you really can protect yourself fully after what happened in Atlanta?
We feel like we can protect ourselves. As far as protecting the general public, I don't know if we can. We're gonna have to make a decision. What's more important, our career and coming home to our families, or protecting someone? That's basically what we've come to.
Yeah. And then this is an important question, okay? We've been hearing all over the place in graffiti-stained walls across America that all cops are racist bastards. So I have to ask you, are you a racist or a white supremacist?
I would hope not. If I am, my grandparents, I'm gonna have a long conversation with them.
Oh, we're having an audio problem from you. We got a little audio problem. That's probably a bad time for an audio problem. Can you hear us?
Are you there?
I think we are losing your audio.
Bummer. Man.
I'm gonna go check here. You just keep talking. I think it's actually his.
No,
his
it's
service,
us.
We're
us, I think.
You think so?
Anyway, we're having a technical. Oh, Are you back, Zeke?
Oh, I'm here.
Yay. Okay, sorry. Wrap up what you were saying. That was a bad pause.
Yeah, it was a bad pause. So if you could answer that question again, that would be good because it stopped right when you were answering it. That was inopportune timing.
Okay, no, I was going to say, I hope I'm not a white supremacist. My grandfather actually marched to Washington with Martin Luther King Jr., so I'm going to have a long talk with him if I am.
Wow.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining us today, Zeke. I mean, it's been such an enlightening conversation, and I've learned a lot, and I hope that our viewers have too. I think we have another guest joining us, so I know you have to get back to work. So thank you again, and thank you for all you do every day, risking your life. We owe you a debt of gratitude.
We appreciate you so much, and everybody give him a follow at Cop with Attitude.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before you go, if you could leave everybody with one sort of piece of wisdom or advice in terms of interacting with police, what would it be? And making them feel appreciated.
Just remember that we're human beings as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. We're human beings as well. And honestly, if you make us laugh, that's your best way out of a summons.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Zeke.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So are we having another guest, Robbie?
Yes, we are. We've got another guest coming up, Michael Matthews. He is supposed to be on any second here now.
So Michael has a book out, and he has specialized in the effects of defunding police movements or pulling back on police resources in the UK. But he's also studied it just around the world, the effects of that. So we wanted to bring him on to discuss his research and what messages, we can learn from him. So,
yep.
Robbie, you're bringing him on, right?
I'm bringing him on. We're waiting for him to hop on, but his book is called We Are the Cops. And to give you guys a little bit of background on him, he was a former Scotland Yard officer and a former UK police officer. He now writes and commentates, but he studies especially, what's happening all across the world in terms of policing. So he has sort of a wide background in terms of figuring out, what are the best policies, what works, what doesn't work. And he's particularly concerned with the defund police movement. So we're looking at his perspective. He's scheduled to come on now. So I've sent him a quick follow-up because he was supposed to be on about 1 minute ago, but he'll be on here in a second. But one of the areas that I think, we're going to get into with him is in the UK. I'd say they have sort of a problem that is very similar to what we're facing here in terms of a politicized police force. So their policing in the UK, I think I would love to pick his brain about how they got to where they are now, where we have grooming gangs in the UK where they have these, mostly migrants that are ending up grooming young girls that, are extremely, it's really dangerous, sort of disgusting thing that's going on. But the police have sort of turned a blind eye to it. Well,
they're social justice police, essentially. And that's what happens when industry is politicized and weaponized to be an arm or an extension of a party. And we've seen this with the FBI. We've seen this with the education system, with modern academia. This is what I believe is happening right now with the defund police movement. It's really not about abolishing police, and they'll tell you that. It's about restructuring and getting all of the toxic masculinity out of police, which is basically anybody who's conservative, who goes home to their family at the end of the day with conservative values. So they want to get rid of those people. That's essentially 90% of our police force and military. And
take a look at what that looks like.
Social justice warriors.
And take a look at what that looks like in the UK.
Ooh, I mean, look at Chaz. Is it Chaz or
Chaz or Chop? They changed their name because I
don't know what's going on.
I think they're embarrassed of it. You know what? Until he gets on, I'm just going to sit with you.
Right.
But just look at the UK and what an absolute disaster their police forces. It's embarrassing.
Right.
You have them out there basically showing up at people's houses because they said something offensive on Twitter. I'm not joking. If you haven't heard about this,
happens.
in the UK, you can literally call the police, or tweet them or DM them or send them a text and let them know that somebody was mean to you on Twitter. Okay.
Like or misgendering or anything like that.
Like they're your mommy or something, okay? And somebody hurt your feelings, and the police will show up at somebody's house.
They also, have police show up at their gay pride parades, wearing rainbow color costumes and stuff over their police uniform. Again, social issues. They're social justice police. That's essentially what's happening, and there's no freedom of speech, and it's completely influencing their crime rates in a really negative way.
Yep. And you got to get into the emotional manipulation of that though, because the reason they do stuff like have cops show up at a gay pride parade is because they say like, oh, if you're opposed to it, you're homophobic. Whereas, the reality is I support gay marriage. Gay people can get married. Doesn't bother me. I think that it's a government issue, not a religious issue. I think, churches should be free to do whatever they want. Churches don't have to endorse anything they don't believe in. And I'm good with that too, because I believe in religious freedom. I also believe the government doesn't have a place to kind of tell adults, if they can marry another adult or not. If you're consenting adults, you both have your brain in the right place, cool. Do what you want, makes you happy. It's not my life. I think that's where you sort of have to have these nuanced lines. But the reason they do this stuff where they have these cops engage in social issues is because they use it as a way to bludgeon the right and make it seem like you're homophobic, you're transphobic, you're, basically every phobic, every xena, whatever they can come up with, you're all these names. You're the devil.
It's the same thing as the feminism movement. It's inherently politicized, okay? So the LGBTQ movement is not inclusive of, LGBTQ conservatives, okay? They're only inclusive of those that share the same political ideology. It's the same with modern feminism. You show up at a women's march and you say, I'm a pro-life conservative woman.
They'll kick you out.
Kick you out. They'll say, get the hell out of here. This isn't your space. It's not inclusive. And so that's really the issue, is that the left likes to take over certain industries, groups, and it's like a mean girl effect. If you're not one of us, you're out. And that's really why when I criticize like gay pride parades, things like that has nothing to do with being gay or their sexual orientation.
Yep.
I have no issue with anybody being who they are as a consenting adult, as long as you're not messing with children. Okay. But, that's another issue, is in that political spirit. Okay. The LGBTQ movement, they've used that to sexualize children. Okay. Having children come and witness adults half naked,
not just half naked.
Around,
there was a viral tweet the other day that was saying,
simulating sex.
No, having sex.
That. Okay. Well,
there was a viral tweet the other day that was
that.
It was like, if you don't want your kid to watch me, get bent over a dumpster and do this. And this went crazy on the internet. If you don't want that, then cover their eyes, because that's what I'm doing at Gay Pride.
And promoting
I'm sorry, in public, I don't care if you're straight, I don't care if you're gay, that's just indecent behavior. We have laws against that for a reason, but for some reason they don't get enforced when things cross that line.
It doesn't matter what kind of parade it is. It doesn't matter to me if it's gay parade, if it's a straight parade, if it's a religious parade, any parade. It's about the behavior.
Yep.
It's not appropriate for kids to be sexualized in any sort of fashion. And then they're doing it, they're endorsing and promoting transgenderism as if it's a fad. That's the problem I had. I don't have a problem with having the conversation and saying whoever has any sort of difference, we need to be inclusive and kind to people. That I'm okay with. But again, it's their take on everything. It has to be their way of seeing the world. And if you don't jump on board their train, then you're a bigot. And that's just that's not the way human beings operate. We all should have our own individual views because we have different experiences. So that doesn't mean you're anti anything just because you're not for something that somebody else is for. And that's just.
I love this.
What?
Somebody said you should call them social justice terrorists. Who is this? Isby Penelope. You mean social justice terrorists. I'm tired of social justice terrorists giving themselves these virtuous names. You're absolutely right. And I'm not going to call them social justice warriors anymore, because they don't deserve the word warriors. They honestly don't even deserve the word social or justice. But they are terrorists. They're little terrorists.
This is the problem. And this is why they're so clever with linguistic manipulation, because they'll get the soundbite or the tweet of you saying, oh, screw these social justice warriors. And essentially you're saying, what, screw social justice? Oh, this social justice is bad? No, the social justice, the idea of it, everybody getting, fair trial, all that, is a good thing. But they use words that sound nice, like the tolerant party on the left, things like that, to confuse, to cause chaos, because words don't mean what they used to mean anymore. And sadly, if there is any racism happening around us, we won't know it or see it or recognize it and be able to do anything about it, because everybody's a racist who doesn't agree with you now. So how can you really address that issue?
Yep. And I want to call out Isaiah Washington, who we just had on the show the other day, made some comments here live that I wanted to read out because he's absolutely right. He said, "This is a well-organized attack from the left. Act accordingly, observe, orient, decide, act." We have reached a tipping point with the left, where we really are at a point where this is organized chaos on purpose, and the right needs to orient itself toward freedom. And we need to know that we've crossed this line here where we cannot accept our politicians standing by to look or be respectable. We need strength, we need clear-eyed thought, and we need to stay strong in our values, be proud of who we are, because what they want is silence. Silence is compliance. They love to call silence violence. They say silence is violence. Silence is really compliance. That's what they want from you. They want you to be quiet about your views. They want you to be afraid of saying who you are and what you believe in, because that's the only way that they can dominate you, is if all of us are quiet, it's as if we don't exist. And that's the world that they want to live in, a world where we don't exist. So if you want to give a gift to the left and wrap it up with a bow, then be silent.
Right.
Don't tell people who you are. Don't proudly be a Republican. Hide it, be ashamed of it. That's what they want you to be. And they've carefully built this narrative through media, through entertainment, to subtly shame you over years and years and years and years and years, so that little by little, they'd chip away at your pride about who you are, about what you believe in, about what type of people you associate with. And little by little, they've made you more and more compliant. So you need to decide, are you going to be silent and be compliant the way the left wants you to be? Or are you going to rise up, be proud of who you are, and say, you know what? No, I'm not going to allow myself to be smeared as a racist or as a homophobe or as a xenophobe. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. I'm not ashamed of it. And you know what? If you don't like it, go kick rocks.
Kick rocks?
Yeah, go kick rocks.
Right.
You don't know that?
No.
That's like an old saying. Go kick rocks.
What, from 1950 or what?
Maybe I had was born in the 1920s in a past life.
Sometimes he says things that are like loitering. Like, what are they loitering? I'm like,
all right, that just makes me sound like a grumpy old man, like I'm Clint Eastwood or something. No, our son does the same thing too, where we pick out these weird phrases from
lousy.
Way back in time, like lousy,
right.
That are not words people use anymore. But I loved what Isaiah said. I think that's it's absolutely true. And emotional reaction is not a course of action. It's clear what's going on. Keep calling it out. He's absolutely right. We cannot emotionally react. We need to have a clear course of action. We need to not be afraid to act. We need to be not afraid of clearly stating what our values are and clearly standing behind them. Because right now, too many people are wavering and bowing to the mob.
That's right.
And that's a product of silence compliance,
Right. And it starts with me. It starts with the individual. I'm not afraid. I'm a conservative, proud Republican woman. I stand by my values. I stand by the policies. That's why I became a Republican. It's why I am conservative. I'm not religious. I just share the same values. They're basic common sense values. And I glean that and make these decisions based on evidence, based on crime statistics, based on how I see communities doing that are run a certain way. That's how I jump to my conclusions carefully and methodically, and I research everything very deeply before I make a decision or an opinion about anything. And if I don't know something, I won't make an opinion about it. I'll research it first. So my allegiance is to truth based on research and facts. It's not emotional. In fact, the emotion is what is really dangerous. Raising children today, everything is to coddle and nurture emotion. Emotions are not facts. Feelings are not facts. They're information, and they should be acknowledged and felt. After all, we're sentient human beings, right? But there's an overemphasis on emotions and feelings. And when we operate from that place, we're not thinking logically or rationally, and we can't make calculated, smart decisions. I mean, when have we ever made a decision when we were highly emotional that turned out well for us? It rarely happens.
Very rare.
So I know some of my worst decisions were emotional decisions, knee-jerk reactions.
Like when you fell in love with me. I'm just kidding. That was a joke.
I put a lot of thought into that before I committed.
Mine was more emotional. So I have to say that was one of my good emotional decisions, was falling in love with you. But that's neither here nor there.
That's different.
It is different. It is different. No, I just
emotional knee-jerk reaction based on seeing a polarizing image.
Yep.
And are we going to make a decision based on seeing that image, or are we going to say, wow, I feel this way from this image. Where did this image come from? Who put it out? Why? Following that logic behind the image, and not just making a decision from the emotional reaction from the image. So I want to say this, I'll be one of the first women. I know there's other conservative, strong women that have stepped forward and done this, but I'm not afraid. The left can attack me all day. In fact, that's something that I gauge my impact is if I'm doing enough fighting for what I believe in. If I'm not getting attacked, I know that I haven't done enough that day. I'm not afraid. There's nothing you can do to me, my husband, my family. We protect ourselves. I'm not afraid to speak truth. And I want other women to stand up with me and join me in that and be proud of who they are and stop feeling like they have to hide. And I want to say that I know that some of us are in a position where there are genuine reasons and concerns for your family's health and safety and for your own livelihood because of the left, the climate that they've made, which is so intolerant, hateful, and divisive. I get messages from people almost on a daily basis who are afraid to speak out at work, and they have to live in this toxic environment where there's just so much bashing and intolerance and discrimination is essentially what it is. And my advice to them is always to find a way that they can speak out. And here's the thing, if you can't come out and speak out for your values and stand up when you know things are wrong, if you're not in that position, find a way to support those who are speaking out and being that voice for you, and stand behind them strong. Because things like our show, for example, if there isn't that level of support, then people like us won't put ourselves out on the line to do it, because obviously we'll feel like, oh, we're alone in this. We need the support of everybody, and any other conservative that's putting their neck out on the line, that's willing to sacrifice their career, their livelihood, their future. And why do we do that? Because we know that we can survive. We're both survivors. We know what we've built out of nothing, and we're going to be okay no matter what.
Yep.
Our happiness isn't defined by money. It isn't defined by career success, accolades, or useless degrees on our wall. I know who I am as a conservative woman, and there's nothing that the left can do that would take away from my life in any way. Yeah. And so that's why I step out, and that's why I do this every day, and why I'm so passionate about it, because I want people to know that they can too. Yeah. And I'll keep fighting until everybody can, without fearing, that they're going to lose their job over having a different opinion. This is not the America that I wanted to bring children into. And that's why we fight every day to change that. Yep.
I couldn't have said it better. You know what I was just thinking, by the way, going through the comments, I see Isaiah's still there. I think we need to have Isaiah back on.
I know.
Because that was actually one of my favorite episodes, was talking to him. And I feel like there's still so much to go through with him. So, what I'm going to do real quick. I think that the guy had trouble getting on. So I'm just going to check real quick.
Yeah. Add him on.
And if he did, then, we may have to move him. But we have tomorrow somebody special that is, his video went viral.
Which one is that tomorrow?
Tomorrow, well, I'm going to keep it a secret for now.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it a secret. But it's somebody whose video went viral that you've all seen. If you perused my page, you may see who it is. So yeah, I think he went to the wrong link. He said he's waiting backstage, but I don't see him backstage here.
The technical difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, this is what she's talking about with supporting the show. Oh, we got him. Is that, it would be great to have somebody
help us make sure that there's not so many technical difficulties, things like that. And I will say, we've had so many people step forward to help us. Oh, look,
there we go.
There we go.
Hey there, Michael. Doing well.
Sorry about that. It's some technical issues.
No worries.
No
I went
worries.
back and tried to assist to make sure you got a fresh link in. So we gave people a little bit of an intro on you about the book that you have. We told them about your book, and we told them your background being a former Scotland Yard officer and former UK officer. We want to jump in on two things. You want to go first, or you want me to go into defund?
So tell us, our audience, a little bit about what kind of research you've done around defunding or pulling back police, power or resources, and the effects of that from your experience and research.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I say is, don't let this Downton Abbey accent confuse you or anything. I've actually spent over 20 years as a police officer in the UK. And I spent about 20 years working with all sorts of different police departments all around America. So everyone from Alaska to New York, LA to Mississippi, all over. And one of the places I spend a lot of time is actually Detroit in Michigan. And I actually wrote a book about my time in Detroit called American Ruin, which is where I got embedded with the Detroit gang unit. So I've seen a lot of policing across America in all sorts of different environments. And the argument around defunding the police, I mean, if you talk about defunding any occupation, the people who are really going to understand the consequences of that are the people doing that job more than anybody else. So we're hearing a lot of people saying defund the police, do this, do that. And no one's really speaking to the police officers. In fact, no one really wants to even hear what the police officers have to say. So when you get these, rich celebrities in their gated mansions in Beverly Hills saying defund the police, okay, it's not going to affect you. So if I take Detroit as the example then, because I do spend a lot of time there, I speak to not just the cops, I go out with the cops, I write about the cops, and they're great guys working in a very, very difficult environment, probably one of the most difficult environments in the whole of the United States. But I also speak to gang members, former gang members, just regular citizens, especially the people who live in the worst, most poorest communities. And when you speak to those people about the police, they don't want less police, they want more police.
Yep,
so it's all very well people saying, defund the police, we want less police. The people saying that are the people it's going to affect the least. If you actually spent time, instead of spending time on your luxury yachts in the Mediterranean or some expensive restaurant in Beverly Hills, spend time in these really poor neighborhoods in Chicago and Baltimore and Detroit and elsewhere, and speak to the people there, the people that are good people that have really, really difficult lives. Because you lived in a neighborhood where outside your front door was gunfire on a sometimes hourly basis, and gangs and robbers and rapists and all these bad people are roaming your streets. Would you want less police? Of course you wouldn't. Right. So the wrong people are talking about defunding the police. And the other thing about defunding the police, people say, well, it's being misunderstood. The message is misunderstood. When we say defunding the police, people think we're talking about abolishing police. We're not. We're talking about defunding to put the money elsewhere. Well, for some people that's true, but I was reading some literature the other day from a Black Lives Matter group, and it had a whole list of demands. And it started off saying defund the police and invest the money elsewhere. Okay. But as you went through this list of demands, it ended up with the eventual goal is to abolish the police and abolish prisons. So it starts off with defunding, but the ultimate goal is the abolishment of police. So don't be taken in by, it's just defunding. For some, maybe it is, and I'm sure that they have good intentions. But for many others, actually, the ultimate goal is to get rid of police and prisons altogether, which, as anyone with any sense knows, that utopia is never going to happen, unfortunately. So, it's an interesting subject. And I wrote about this recently for an online piece about defunding the police. And if you speak to cops in these who work these really poor neighborhoods, these difficult neighborhoods, and again, I refer to Detroit, the cops there will say, yes, we need to invest in these communities. They need investment. They need help. They need all these things. They need better schools, better infrastructure, healthcare. All this stuff needs to come in. But if you're going to defund the police, and that's what people say, well, defund the police, we get that money, and then we put it into these communities and make the communities better. Well, that's fine. But if you're defunding the police, you're going to have this period of time where that money will be put aside somewhere, who knows where, and how long it's going to stay there. And the results of that investment are going to take a long time to come through. In the meantime, you've got less police, and less police means more crime. More crime means more poverty and more hardship for people. So in fact, you're going to end up making the situation worse, and then you're going to need even more money to fix it. So my argument would be is rather than defunding the police, yes, definitely, and most cops will tell you this, definitely invest in these poor communities, the people there, but find the money, and I know it's difficult, but find the money elsewhere. And then when things start to get better, you see the results of that investment, and you're seeing people's lives get better, poverty starts to reduce, crime starts to go down, then maybe you can talk about defunding the police then, but not before. It's back to front.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't it a false paradigm though what they're doing to try to get people on board with defunding the police? Because it sounds like, you know, sensible circular logic, like we take the money from the police and we put it in schools, the schools will do better. But in reality, you know, you look in Baltimore, 16,300, you know, for each kid, and that money isn't getting there, and the schools aren't being run. So isn't it a false paradigm to say that, you know, if we just reallocate, redistribute the funds, that all these other problems will be solved?
No, I believe if the money actually went where it's meant to go, if they actually found some money, not from the police, but if they found some money elsewhere and did invest in schools and communities and improve people's lives, then you know, it's known fact, and people's lives get better, crime goes down. When poverty is reduced, crime goes down. So if the money actually went there, but again, let's talk about Detroit. Detroit's such a fascinating city for me, and it's the reason I go there multiple times a year. I spend a lot of time there with the cops and with the people in the city. And one of the reasons it's so interesting is because I wrote in my book American Ruin that if you want to know about America, study Detroit, because everything that's going on in America is going on right there in this small area. So in Detroit, what they did is, you know, if you know, everyone's heard about Detroit, whether you've been there or not, you've seen the pictures, you've seen the images. When I first started going there almost 20 years ago, it was a devastated city. Downtown was a ghost town. It was an absolute nightmare. And not even talking about the neighborhoods, I'm talking about the downtown core. Over the last few years, they've invested huge amounts of money. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into the downtown core of Detroit. And it's actually a very nice place now. It's a great place to visit. It's small, but it seems safe. Starbucks, casinos, restaurants. It's the outer neighborhoods are as bad as ever. That money, a lot of that money has come from the school taxes. So up until the year 2051, the city will continue taking hundreds of millions of dollars in school taxes to fund the downtown core and make it great. Meanwhile, the people in the neighborhoods and the kids in the schools are having as bad a time as ever. And some of the neighborhoods are worse than ever. So this is a problem when they talk about defunding, is can you really trust the money's going to go where it's going to go? Are you really going to make people's lives better, or are you going to use it for your own pet projects? And with the excuse of, you know, the long-term goal is to make people's lives better. When in fact, look at some cities, and that isn't the case at all. In fact, some people's lives are worse than they ever have been.
Absolutely, and there's an effect of taking money from what is essential to a civil society of keeping everybody safe, when we can't even do that as is. You know, it's not necessary to take money from the police to enrich, you know, these other areas. In fact, you know, there's a lot of other things that could be defunded. I know in LA, they spent millions of dollars on public beach bathrooms and murals, you know, diversity murals, things like that. But yet they want to defund police. It's abusive of funds. I mean, it's abusive power.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, I think of when I think about the money put into murals, like millions of dollars put into these murals, it actually makes me think of the UK police, which you should be pretty familiar with. UK police have changed quite a bit in recent history. And in large part, you know, they've sort of acted as sort of social justice police too in some areas, where they're showing up at people's houses because they said something on Twitter that they don't like. How did the UK get there from, you know, sort of a proud, historic, you know, to be honest, when I was a kid, I remember when people talked about Scotland Yard, it was talked about like it was like, you know, it was a really big deal, you know. And it had this sort of
it is a big deal.
It had this trustworthiness attached to it, in this, you know, sort of allure, right? And now it seems like anything in the UK, you refer to law enforcement, people think that it's like a cartoon show where they're like, you know, you call, like, you know, you're telling on somebody for saying something they don't like, and like, you know, they come to the door like they're everybody's mommy saying, why did you say this? It's not nice. You hurt somebody's feelings. And, you know, I mean, it's kind of gotten a little ridiculous. So how did they get there?
I'm not sure I'd completely agree that it's got that bad. I mean, does it happen? There was one force in the UK where they created this number, I think it's a phone number people could ring up, and they could report non-crime incidents. So if you'd been called a name over Twitter or on Facebook, you could report it as a non-crime incident. And police officers around the country absolutely annihilated that idea, saying this is ridiculous. If it's non-crime, why is it being reported to the police? We're busy enough as it is. We shouldn't be taking people's details if they've committed a non-crime. It's draconian. It shouldn't be allowed. It's practically Orwellian. So I think that was actually stopped. But if someone calls, and there is another side of the argument, and I do get that as well. I think being a police officer, I do try and see both sides of any argument. And I think the point was that it can start off with a name being called on Twitter, but it could escalate, or Facebook, and it could escalate to becoming a homicide. And this is true in places in the cities, and again, Detroit and Chicago and elsewhere, where gangs are killing each other over something that was said over Facebook. And we do have gangs in the UK. It's not quite the same as the US, because obviously the gun controls in the UK are vastly different, and they're far fewer. So when gangs kill each other, it tends to be with knives rather than guns. So I think maybe the fear was, well, if you report so and so calling you a stupid name over Facebook, at least we know who that so and so was. You end up dead in the street. Well, maybe we can get back to that person. Maybe that was the thinking. But I can tell you, when that came out that this force was going to do this, people jumped all over them over it. They thought it's ridiculous and it shouldn't be allowed, and it's keeping people's information when they've done nothing wrong, and it wasn't right. So I don't think it's as bad as people think it is.
What I was referring to is it, there's actually forces still doing it, and they still have this up. I wish I had the name on me right now. They have a Twitter account dedicated to it too, where people send things in. But the problem is, these are not things like, oh, they made a threat against my life. It's like, they misgendered me on Twitter, and that's a hate crime against me because they called me the wrong pronoun. It's ridiculous stuff like that. Or you see the way that they treated grooming gangs. That's something I have an issue with, because we're big advocates, against human trafficking and against modern day slavery. And you see what some of the grooming gangs have gotten away with over there. And it's sort of shocking, that I don't think that if this was 20 years ago, I do not believe that they would be handling it the same way as they've been handled now. Do you think I'm wrong?
I think the police are a lot more cautious now in how they deal with certain things, because as we're seeing, it's so easy now for people to call out the police over absolutely nothing. So I think police officers are becoming, individual police officers, but also departments, the big departments as a whole, and the bosses who are worried about their next rank in their career, are becoming more cautious. Sometimes to the detriment of investigations and society. And we have to be very careful of that. So when someone says, I've been called the wrong pronoun on Twitter and I want to report it, I imagine most police officers will say, hang on, this isn't really a crime. If the government decide to legislate it as a hate crime, then the police will have no choice but to investigate it. But until that happens, until it is actually designated a hate crime, I think it's down to officers' discretion. They may go around someone's house if they've got time to talk to them about it and maybe take some details. Who knows? But police officers, I've had my car broken into in the UK when I live in North America now. But when I lived in the UK, I had my car broken into twice. And on both occasions, the police didn't come because they just didn't have anybody. So if police aren't sending people to burglaries and car crime, turning up at someone's house because someone called them a name on Twitter, it's going to be low on the list of priorities, I would imagine.
It should be. It should be not on the list of priorities in my point of view. But I would say, it poses sort of natural questions about what we're dealing with in America, because I think a large part of sort of the movement to defund and dismantle, a lot of it's really about remaking it in the image of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party really has a hold on a lot of different industries, on culture, on entertainment, on all these different sort of pillars of society. One of the areas where they do not have power and do not hold, sort of the keys, so to speak, is in law enforcement. They really don't have the power there. It's been more dominated by the right. And I think the goal really is to remake it in their image and have something that's more similar to what you see in the UK. But there's not as many officers with guns. There's a lot more sort of, if there was, different ways to send different people, like social services only in to deal with somebody who's having, say, a mental health crisis, and not send officers at all, which by the way, I think it'd be a good idea to send both, but they're wanting to remake it in this sort of direction where you would have police be able to take on social issues too. So like if you had Pride Parade here, you would have officers taking part in Pride Parade while getting paid on the job, which despite the fact that I'm pro-gay marriage, I still just from the standpoint of like, we need to have institutions that are separate from social issues and politics. I think that's where we sort of end up in these murky areas. And it's sort of where the left wants to veer this conversation in this industry as a whole is into a direction where it's more built around sort of this unicorny idea that, you know, we can just have peace and love everywhere, when in reality, you go to places like Detroit, Baltimore, there's certain areas of town where, you know, unicorns and rainbows aren't going to solve things. People need to go to jail, you know, for a lot of what the crimes they're committing. So, you know, that's where sort of my concerns stem from, is that I think they're trying to veer us into this area where we remake police in their image in a way that would leave people less safe, leave communities in more danger.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing, when you're talking about gay pride, what I'm seeing in North America is more and more groups saying they don't want police there, whether in uniform or not in uniform, on duty, they don't want them there. And yeah, I've seen it in parts of Canada, cities in Canada, Toronto and Vancouver, where they're now saying the police aren't welcome. Then you got things like Paw Patrol, you know, being cancelled, and
ridiculous.
What they're doing, what I'm finding is happening to the police. I mean, just early today, I saw something on Twitter. A writer had posted something about how in the media, and they're talking about books and television shows and movies, cops who are violating people's rights, bad cops basically, are shown to be heroes. And they're talking about things like the Lethal Weapon movies, say, where you've got cops there gunning people down, maybe preaching people's rights, but they're the heroes of the movie, and this sort of thing. So people, and it actually, that made me think. I thought that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective. That, you know, we've got these TV shows where cops are kind of rough and bad and not doing things by the book, and they are idolized and they are the heroes of the show. But then, so people saying that's wrong, we should stop this. Okay, but they're also saying anything that shows cops in a good light should also be banned. So Paw Patrol, I mean, for God's sake, it's a cartoon for kids, but because it's a positive portrayal of police, that needs to be banned. The Cops TV show, you know, what's that? The Live PD. You know, these shows are come off the air because they're showing the police in a positive image. Well, you don't want them being showed in a negative image. You don't want them being in a positive image. What you're saying is you just don't want them being showed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You want to like almost airbrush the police out of society. So, you know, even schools now are, you know, in the US and Canada and elsewhere, are questioning whether police should be in the schools at all.
Yeah.
Now, whatever your opinions of whether police should be in schools or not, the way it looks to me is what they're trying to do is have kids never see cops, whether it's in the schools, whether it's on TV or movie. They don't want them seeing police, as if we don't exist or the police don't exist. And I have to question that. Why are they trying to airbrush the police out of society, be they good or bad? I can see them saying, well, why should a bad cop be portrayed as a hero in a movie? Yeah, okay, I can see that argument, I guess. But I can't see the argument of why cops shouldn't be shown as being good, because as we know, most cops are good. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. That's the truth. Right. So why can't we show that truth? So I don't understand that argument of why they're trying to just get rid of police from media altogether. That just seems crazy to me. It's that actually seems quite, you know, quite sinister.
Right. I mean, I think
when it gets to that point where they don't want good cops or bad cops.
Right. It's evidence that there's a greater motive at play here than simply restructuring and calling out specifics of what they want, you know, changed or modified, or specific cases of injustices that can be protested and advocated for to change for reform, which I don't think, you know, the average person, like what happened with Breonna Taylor, you know, that misstep there where they went into the wrong house and just, you know, gunned her down. You know, there's real things like that happen, and those individual circumstances should be rectified.
See, that's actually something where I would like to see some changes on no-knock raids. I think it would be a good idea that those are only used in very, 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 very specific, narrow situations. And when they are used, I think there needs to be a check and balance system to ensuring that you're at the right place, in the right city, at the right street, on the right house.
And make sure there's no children there.
Yeah, because we've seen this a number of times where there were no-knock warrants done, and they're at the place that's next door to where they were actually supposed to be. And so there's obviously a lack of checks and balances in terms of making sure you're in the right place, you have the right suspect, and that this is really a serious crime because somebody could end up dead. So in the case of Breonna Taylor, they went in the wrong house. And I think that, those situations there are things we can do to correct, and I think I was happy to see some of the things that Trump did, I think are sort of common sense, pragmatic approaches to fixing some of the problems. And unfortunately, because Trump did them, they're bad. It doesn't matter if he had given them everything they wanted, they would have been like, oh, it's still bad because, he forgot to put a period here, whatever it is. They would have found a way to hate it, but the reality is I'm happy that he did sort of pragmatic things like the federal database on officers. I think that that's a good idea to make sure that bad officers aren't able to just jump from one county to another. But, I do think the whole premise of defund police, whether you actually mean it, actually defunding and actually dismantling, or whether you mean remaking it in your image, in both directions, they're very dangerous things.
They are, and talking about the no-knock warrants. I mean, I've gone through the wrong door before. It happens. Sometimes the intelligence is bad. Sometimes you just make a mistake. But something like a no-knock warrant is a real breach, really, of people's rights. That's a serious step up for policing when you are going through a person's door, when you're smashing it down basically and forcing your way in. They're done for reasons, obviously. Sometimes to secure evidence, sometimes for officer safety reasons, sometimes for the person's safety. But I do get that there do need to be some changes within policing. I think most police officers would agree with that. I mean, one of the issues I have is where an officer can be fired from a department for misconduct and then be rehired by another department. I'd question that. I question that would hire someone that's got misconduct. And I think that should be, maybe there needs to be a national database for these officers so they can't be rehired by another department.
Yeah, I think
there are certainly changes that need to be made. And no-knock warrants. Yeah, I mean, they need to be questioned. Are they really that necessary, and what are the reasons behind them? But different cities do different things. I mean, I've spent time with SWAT teams in Vegas. I spent time with SWAT teams in Chicago. Vegas SWAT, what a great bunch of guys in it, doing a great job. But they're very, very paramilitary, and they're probably the most paramilitary SWAT team in the whole nation. Then I spend time with SWAT guys in Chicago, say, and the rules there are extraordinarily strict about what they can and can't do. And they wouldn't be able to do half the stuff that the cops in Vegas can do. So, the rules, I heard you talking earlier to your last guest about having federal police. So it's just like one police department for the whole country. And I'm sure there are some good arguments for that and there are some bad arguments for that. But, own country, an enormous country, with so many different law enforcement agencies, like 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the whole country, all doing things differently, with states that have got
I think we're losing
different rules and different regulations, which is confusing. Something can happen in this city.
Yeah, I think we're losing you a little bit. We did cover this on the federal side with the last guest. But, on the defund police, I think you have some really great points. And could you tell people where they can get your book at if they want to check it out?
I mean, there's two books that are really relevant for this. I'll show you. One is American Ruin, which is that one, which is about my time in Detroit, where I was embedded with the gang in Detroit. And it's not just about policing, it's about the city itself. It's about the people, about the crime, about the gangs. And it talks a lot, including the police are very, very open with me, talking about what needs to change and how things should be better for the residents of Detroit and how frustrated they get that people outside the city don't understand what's actually going on in these neighborhoods, to the point some people won't even believe how bad they are. And then the other one people will be interested in is We Are the Cops, which is a bunch of interviews I did with police officers all across America, from chiefs of police to state sheriffs, about their lives and about what policing really is about. And there's good stuff in there. There's some tragic stuff in there. There's some funny stuff in there. Like it's the truth about policing from all different aspects. That may interest people because it's quite eye-opening. You know, cops are very, when you speak to them, are very honest about their job, and they're very honest with me. They've never tried to cover things up. They've never tried anything that they're not. They've always shown me the truth and told me the truth. And I wish more people would realise who these guys and girls really are, and the job they actually do. And these books will show. But of course, who hate the police, because there are people who just hate the police. Right. They've got no interest in knowing the truth or knowing how good they are. And they just don't want to hear it. All they want to hear is police are bad, get rid of police. It's a shame.
It is a shame.
The people that probably need to read these books won't read the books.
Thank you. It is a shame. Thank you so much for coming on. We were happy to have you. And I think we, throughout this episode with you and the officer we had on earlier, gave people a lot to think about. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I am losing you. I'm losing you, but thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Here, you want to go through that real quick? Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We're definitely working on fixing them. So I hope you all have a great day.
Oh, tell them what's coming soon. So we have, by the way, anybody who's still on, we have I Am Republican coming out. It's an hour-long documentary. It's awesome. Teasers are coming out soon. There's going to be merch. There's going to be a hashtag, and we're going to have some action items for all of you guys. It's going to be really cool. I'm super excited about it. I hope you are too. That's coming very soon. Probably early next week would be my guess. We're going to set a date later today, but I think probably Tuesday would be my guess.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a great day.
And we'll be back tomorrow. We have a special guest that I will tell you guys about later today.
What time?
At 2 tomorrow.
2 tomorrow. See y'all there.
Bye, guys.
Bye.